now streaming live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. And I am super excited to have Wildcat with us today, talking about one of the things that he is really passionate about, which I am so excited to learn more about, which is soil ecology. So without further ado, I'm going to give it to you, Wildcat. Go ahead, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Alana. I want to start by saying thank you to Alana for allowing me the opportunity to do this. This is a part of a fundraiser to help her keep high-frequency lofts in the communities as a resource for our communities. And it's been a wonderful resource for our communities for a long time, so I'm really happy to do this. She has hosted ecstatic dances and yoga and a lot of great talks and all kinds of other wonderful things that that I remember, and probably a ton of other wonderful things I didn't even hear about. And so it's been a wonderful resource for the community for a long time. And there are links. You can get a hold of me or her or High Frequency Lofts. There are links on the Facebook page, I think, for the fundraiser. Please do donate if you can. So my name is William Wildcat, for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm Oklahoma Seminole, from the Seminole Nation, and I grew up doing organic farming, biodiverse polyculture, in a culture that does polyculture and organic farming, and so it's been a part of my life, my whole life, and got into growing ganja as a teenager and just loved that, and got into organic and started learning about soil bacteria, microbes, and the beneficial relationship they have with plants, because a lot of us think bacteria bad, and we have to unlearn that to realize that we're in communities, and we are communities of bacteria and other types of living organisms. And the biodiversity inside of us is necessary for our lives and our livelihood, our health, rather. And then we learned that the biodiversity and the ecosystems we're a part of is vital for the health of those ecosystems. And so really biodiversity is the immune system of Mother Earth, the way it's our immune system. And my interest in soil ecology just sort of grew and grew and grew in relation to my, as a part of my interest in organic farming, organic gardening, stuff like that. And so eventually I started learning about soil fungi, and that opened some new doors, and I began going to the Telluride Mushroom Festival some years ago and learning about mycology and bringing more understanding of fungi into the work that I do. And eventually I started branching away from just gardening and looking at ecosystems as a whole and at regenerative ecology as a whole. And biodiversity is, the keystone, of course, of all regenerative ecology work. And regenerative ecology is a phrase that I use for just lack of a better, there's not a common phrase to use there yet. We're sort of creating this area of study and of practice as a species right now. And it's a large umbrella that encompasses a lot of different things. It encompasses regenerative horticulture and agriculture, wildland restoration, wetland restoration, really any way that human beings want to be in relationship with Mother Earth. There are ways that we can be conscious to work with and to support biodiversity. And when we do that, there's a lot of benefits. And so let me talk about the why of regenerative ecology. And I'll talk about what you can do. We'll cover a little bit of the basics of the science of it. And I don't know. I have a few topics I'd like to cover in the hour and a half-ish that we have here. And so the why. There are a lot of reasons why. It kind of, for me, begins with carbon sequestration. We have a lot of control. The choices we make have a lot of effect on how much carbon is being sequestered in whatever land we're steward for, whether that's your backyard, a little potted plant, a small garden, an acre farm, a 10 or 1,000 acre farm, a ranch. If you have a vacant lot, which you're a steward for, the choices you make with how you interact with that determine to a great extent how much carbon sequestration will happen there. And when we do regenerative ecology work, when we choose to be in healthy relationship with the land that we're stewards for, we have the power to sequester a lot of carbon, and that matters for mitigating this extinction event that we're in. And this extinction event is accelerating. It's a bad deal. It's happening. We're seeing huge die-offs. You know, we lost 80% of the biomass of the insects on this planet in the last 26 years. And that's tremendous, and it's really a bad thing. We had
Wow,
that huge
that
songbird
is
die-off this
crazy.
year. We had that huge songbird die-off this year, which it was so extensive, and there's so many different species that had such different varying ranges that there was no one hypothesis for why. You know, there are a lot of different hypotheses, some overlapping for the different species why. You know, most of them were hungry, were dying of starvation was what most of them, well, most of the, you know, answers were for a lot of those species. And it just follows naturally that when we lose the insects, we're going to lose the birds. And, you know, everybody, we're all related and we're all in this together. And so it really matters that we all become conscious stewards of whatever land we're in relationship with. And so I encourage everybody to think of themselves as a steward for whatever land they're in relationship with, and to make intelligent, wise choices for how they work with that land. Carbon sequestration is big in a lot of ways, you know, and I'll come back to that. More of the why is water infiltration and water retention. When we do regenerative ecology work, when we choose to restore biodiversity and bring, you know, encourage biodiversity, we start building living soil. And living soil is basically carbon-based, and that's how the carbon sequestration is happening. And all of these different molecules, many thousands or hundreds of thousands of different carbon-based molecules collectively allow a much greater rate of water infiltration. So when it rains on whatever land you're taking care of, the water goes into that land instead of just like flying across it to the closest river and then, you know, beelining it straight for the nearest ocean. And then our continent loses that water quickly when we're not taking care of the land. We've lost most or all of the soil in most of the world, certainly in North America. You know, we had meters of topsoil in northern New Mexico. I'm here in the Gila right now. We had meters of topsoil here 500 years ago when bad agricultural technologies arrived from Europe, and we destroyed the soil with those technologies in a couple hundred years. And so now soil doesn't infiltrate, water doesn't go into the soil now very quickly. So if you have a hard rain, most of that water is just going to race across the earth, find a river, find an ocean, and it's lost. Whereas if you have a bunch of soil, if you had feet even of topsoil, even inches, there'd be a much greater rate of water infiltration and a much greater rate of water retention. Soil holds water. And so basically what I'm talking about today is building living soil in a number of different ways, depending on what your relationship with that land is. And I'm going to get into some of the science of how to do that, depending on what your relationship with that land is. Carbon sequestration, water infiltration and retention, nutrient cycling. When we build living soil, we increase the rate of nutrient cycling, or the amount of nutrients that are cycling, you know, by mass or whatever. Even, you know, the numbers of different types of atoms that are cycling, you know, different types of elements. And so we increase the nutrient densities of foods. And that's really significant for a lot of reasons. It increases the vitality and the vigor and the resilience of individual plants and of whole ecosystems. It increases the nutrient densities of the foods and the medicines which we're taking from those ecosystems. And that increases our resilience, our health, our vigor, and makes us more resistant to diseases and just healthier and happier in general. It increases our capacities in a lot of ways, including intellectually, emotionally. Everything gives us more resources to work with. And therefore, no matter what your interest is, if you increase the nutrient density, the nutrient cycling in the ecosystems you're taking food from, and hopefully giving nutrients back to, hopefully you're in, you're cycling nutrients with that ecosystem that you're part of. When we do that, it increases our capacities and our health and our vigor, but even mental capacities and everything. So regardless of what your interests are, building living soil, increasing the biodiversity in the ecosystem you're a part of, where, whatever ecosystems you get food from, that has it's just going to have a direct benefit to whatever your interests are, whatever your work is, to the health of your family, so it's just directly relevant to all of us in every way possible. Preserving and restoring biodiversity, once again, for me, kind of comes back to mitigating this extinction event to whatever extent is possible. In order to, one of regenerative ecology does not have a globally accepted definition yet, and so there's some ethical, arguments that I make that, I believe that there are some concepts that should be a part of whatever we accept that definition to be, and I might get into that. This is I don't have a lot of time to talk today, so I might touch on that. But basically, we have to be preserving and restoring biodiversity in order to do regenerative ecology, in order to build living soil, in order to increase water infiltration and retention, to increase carbon sequestration. We have to be bringing back biodiversity to lands. And so it's kind of one and the same, but then also that's a benefit of doing it, is that we're preserving the biodiversity that's left during this extinction event, and we're restoring biodiversity in areas. And it sort of has a snowball effect. These bad technologies for ranching and farming and stuff like that, that have destroyed all of the soil in most of the world now, sort of had a snowball effect. Things just, once things tipped out of a range, like a threshold, there's just a range that things can move ecologically, and once it went out of the bad side of that, it just started snowballing, and we've lost all the soil. We get things back into a good range, and things can have a snowball effect, a positive feedback loop in a good direction, as opposed to negative. And so biodiversity brings more biodiversity, and so one of the pieces of the definition I hope that we as a species come to accept for regenerative ecology is that we get things to a state where we can back out as human beings. Not that we're ever separate from the ecosystems we're always a part of it, but to get things back to where we don't have to keep consciously manipulating in ways that are unnatural to us, that we can just get to a place where we're foraging, and that system is going to continue to rebuild itself. And I'm not going to go too far off in that direction right now. Ecosystem resilience is another benefit to regenerative ecology, to building living soil, to restoring biodiversity. When everything has higher nutrient density and just more medicines available to it in the soil food web coming into, when all the plants have more medicines coming in through their roots, when they have access to more nutrients and more medicines, when they're more nutrient dense, they're individually more resilient, more resistant to insect attack, to diseases, to drought, and collectively, when there's biodiversity in ecosystems, and when those plants are all healthier individuals, then those ecosystems have more resilience. And so, say if you're a farmer or a gardener, what that means to you is all of your plants are going to have less, they're going to be less likely to be damaged significantly by powdery mildew, by a bunch of grasshoppers coming through, by a big drought. If you have, if the hottest month of the year, the hottest 3 months of the year, you don't get a drop of water, your farm can stay green and thriving if healthy soil. If your plants are growing out of healthy soil, they will stay green and they will stay alive and they'll keep thriving during that long, hot drought period. Whereas if you're trying to grow out of dead dirt, the way most farmers in the world are, even most organic farmers, the drought, there's no There's no buffer there. The plants will die. So that's a bunch of the why. I'd like to talk about the difference between dirt and soil. We sell potting soil in bags, and there's no soil in it. What we mean when we say soil is just it's a huge mixture of many thousands, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of different carbon-based molecules that are the result of many different types of organisms eating each other and pooping each other out and excreting things and dying, and then their bodies, rotting and decomposing. There's a lot, but it's all, the product of biological life. Decomposer fungi, the saprophytes, have a huge role in that. Saprophytic fungi are the ones that make humic substances, and so the humic substances are just tremendously valuable. They allow they allow gas exchange to where aerobic organisms can thrive and live deep down, where they can keep breathing oxygen. They do amazing water retention, water infiltration. They hold stray atoms that break off of organic molecules and would normally go back into a mineral form where we can't access them, and they would need to be stripped off of those rocks or crystals or whatever they come back into by fungi or a lichen or something like that in order to be put back into an organic molecule to be once again available to us in the food web. But if they hit a humic substance, the humic substance will hold it and keep it there kind of indefinitely until it can be used again, without any special organisms having to do all that work. And so there's a ton of value there. And also those, say, like, ions don't move through the soil into the aquifer, out of the rhizosphere, the area where roots can access them. And so, individual ions, plant can just suck that up and use that. If it's like a salt that comes apart in water into two ions, positive and negative, if there's no soil there to hold it, when it rains, those ions will move down out of the rhizosphere, out of the root zones into the aquifer, and then bind, back into mineral form somewhere along the way as the water's moving down towards rivers. And those atoms are not accessible to plants. Whereas if those atoms are in soil, they're going to be bound to humic substances, and they'll stay there until somebody comes along to use them. And so soil is this big amalgamation of many, I don't know, just infinitely, like just thousands and thousands and thousands of different types of carbon-based molecules, thousands and thousands and thousands of different species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods. It's made of, has rotting plant matter, especially at the surface, where everything falls. You have this big thick layer where everything is decomposing and everybody's just eating something and pooping it out, and then somebody's coming and eating them and pooping them out, and somebody's eating that person and pooping them out. And pee and poop is plant food, and it's also food for other bacteria, and then they're food for people who pee and poop them out, and then that's plant food. And it's all eventually going back down into plants that are using it and making more plant matter that's hitting the surface again and starting. And so we have this nutrient cycling going on. So soil. And so then you have, like, getting down into the mineral layers where you have actual, like, sand, silt, clay, stuff like that. And you have still a lot of organic matter in there, roots going through, a lot of organisms, especially along those roots. Soil. Dirt is what we mostly have left on this planet. It's mineral. It's if you look at sand, silt, clay under the microscope, you're going to see little rocks. They're just smaller and smaller and smaller little rocks. Clay, very, very fine. The rocks. Western science tells us that we do not have access to any of those atoms. There's a lot of people that believe you can eat clay and get some benefit from it, but as far as Western science is concerned, when atoms are in mineral form, they're in crystalline form, they're not accessible to plants or animals. And so you need soil fungi or lichens or certain specialists to come along and strip atoms off of rocks and put them into organic molecules, which can then be used by plants and animals. And then that atom can begin cycling in the nutrient cycling system until like a gamma ray flies through and just breaks this one atom off. And at that point, it's either going to stick to something in soil and can keep being used, it can be picked up, put back into an organic, keep being used, or if there's no soil there, if it's, you know, if you're doing just regular quote unquote organic farming, then it gets broken off, it just finds a rock and boom, electrically, molecular, I don't know, I'm not an atomic physicist, but you know, it binds back into mineral form and is no longer available. So dirt is mineral. It's all mineral. It's just rocks, crystals. You look under the microscope, it's all rocks. Those atoms are not available to us. There is no dirt in the world which is deficient in any micronutrient and any nutrient that plants need to thrive or that animals need to thrive. I'm gonna say that one more time. It's true, it's widely accepted. It's in every first year soil science book in every university in the world. There is no soil, no dirt in the world that is deficient in any nutrient that plants or animals or fungi or any other life form needs to thrive. There's no place on earth where we're missing copper, magnesium, cobalt, anything like that. What we have is a deficiency of the organisms, the living beings, which strip atoms off of rocks and put them into organic molecules and make them available to life. And so what we need to do, so we have 5-10% nutrient density in the foods that we get at Whole Foods or even the farmer's market in Santa Fe. There's nobody selling any fruit or vegetable at the farmer's market in Santa Fe, New Mexico that is doing regenerative horticulture. There's nobody there who has organic food, fruits or vegetables that is more nutrient dense than anything you're going to get at the co-op or the Whole Foods or anything like that. We're looking at like 5%, 10% of the nutrient density that those same foods had 50 years ago. 50 years ago, they had 50% of what they had 50 years before that. And so it's a really sad state. You know, a tomato can look like a tomato, but have no flavor, no taste, you know, and so, and we know that, and then, you know, homegrown tomato has a lot more flavor, a lot more taste, but the flavor that old people like myself remember from the early 80s, that homegrown tomato flavor, that's gone. We don't taste that anymore. There are highs that are lost from ganja, same strain grown in the same part of the world, Acapulco Gold, Panama Red, whatever, it doesn't give that same high anymore. That's lost, it's gone. Watermelons, you know, as late as the early mid 90s, we still had good watermelons on this planet. You can't find one anymore. You know, and so that tomato that you get at, you know, the supermarket, it's big, it's red, it's clearly a tomato, it has viable seeds in it, they'll germinate, they'll make another tomato plant. You know, it had enough to survive the way we have enough to survive and to make more babies, but we're not nutrient dense, we're not very, very healthy, we're not really thriving the way if you grew that same tomato plant in really healthy living soil, it would have a lot more flavor, a lot more aroma, it would have a lot more medicines in it. And so when we talk about nutrient density in foods, you know, we have the Andy scale that Whole Foods uses. We have ways to do it. All they're measuring are elements, are, you know, manganese, cobalt, calcium, you know, whatever. There are thousands, many thousands of different organic molecules that fungi make, soil fungi make, that they'll exchange with plants in exchange for the sugars that the plants make. That are medicines for that plant, and they're medicines for us. And so the medicines that we grow, you know, if you're an herbalist, if you're a curandera, if you're a medicine person of any sort, there are so many unknown thousands, hundreds of thousands of different medicines that are just not present now in the foods that we're eating, in the medicines that we're consuming, growing, sharing with our loved ones, with our communities, because we've destroyed the soil, and we generally don't know how to build living soil. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how do we build living soil. So that was the difference between soil and dirt. Soil is just this living, it's an ecology of its own, where most of it are carbon-based molecules. Dirt is just mineral form. It's just rocks and sand, silt, clay. It's what most of us have. If you just walk outside right here, there's very little organic matter in there. It's mostly all mineral. That's dirt. Soil, you might not even see any sand, silt, or clay in it. It could be meters without any of that, but you have just tons and tons of all those minerals, all those elements, those atoms are in organic molecules. They're not in mineral form. They're in organic molecules that we can access and can use. So the difference between soil and dirt, it's really important. It really matters. Nutrient cycling. I'd like to talk about nutrient cycling a little bit. So we're right next to this big warm star, and we have this really beautiful life support system that Lynn Margulis believes kind of made the perfect environment. Once life began on Earth, it took some, a billion years or so until we had, it took a billion years of life chemically, like geoforming the planet to this environment where we have this really nice temperature spectrum that we stay in, a really nice air pressure spectrum that we stay in, very nice, electromagnetic, like how much light is coming in, how much radioactive everything, and we got to this place that we have this really beautiful environment where we can all live and thrive in. Oxygen levels, carbon dioxide levels, everything staying in these perfect little thresholds where we can have just really beautiful life and really thrive together. So we have the sun bringing energy into the system constantly. And we have infrared leaving the planet constantly. And so we have this constant stream, this input of energy in and input of energy out. And we stay, there are these long-term, like over millennia, over hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years, there's shifts in how much, the sun is putting out more energy sometimes, putting out less. The earth is holding less energy sometimes, holding more. So everything's always in flux here from a physical electromagnetic energy standpoint. The sun, the energy of the sun is what fuels photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is the magic that allows all of the rest of us to exist. Photosynthesis creates sugars, and it uses the energy of the sun. The sun is what fuels all the nutrient cycling here, and that's why I bring this up. Sun energy is what is the energy that pushes it's the engine of all of this nutrient cycling. Water is like the catalyst, carbon is the structure, the frame. Photosynthesis, the plants are the ones doing all the magic, making it all possible for us. We couldn't live without them. They make, and even another photosynthetic things, cyanobacteria like spirulina, algae, microalgae, the things we call algae, macroalgae, the things we call kelp, lichens, or these communities of fungi and bacteria and algae and all these things that are just community. They each still have their own distinct DNA. They're still distinctly fungi with distinctly bacteria, distinctly algae. They're doing, the algae and lichens are doing photosynthesis, and photosynthesis creates sugars. Basically, everything's a sugar. If you add one nitrogen atom to a sugar, you have an amino acid. If you put two amino acids together, you have a protein. That protein, that very simple protein that we're talking about here in this hypothetical, is two sugars made by photosynthesis they each have a nitrogen atom in it. So your protein is still sugar. Lipids, same deal. They might have like an extra hydrogen atom or something like that. I'm not a chemistry expert here, but they're a sugar with an extra hydrogen atom. So proteins, lipids, amino acids, these are sugars with an extra atom here or there. Plant cellulose are sugars put together in chains. Fungi chitin, sugars put together in chains. Tree lignin, bushes, trees, shrubs, lignin, that hard stuff that makes wood very, very hard compared to like a normal plant stalk is a little bit more malleable. These are like longer chains of sugars. Everything, everything inside you, it's all sugars. Your teeth and bones are kind of I guess mineral, like some minerals. So it's not everything, But basically everything that we're eating here on this planet is a sugar made through photosynthesis that might have an extra atom here or there. And so photosynthesis is creating all of the food. And so that's kind of where it begins with carbon dioxide, H2O, water, CO2 is carbon dioxide, H2O, water, and then sunlight. And then plants doing photosynthesis. Plants put out about a third on average of all of the chemical energy, all the sugar, protein, lipids, everything they make, um, all the nutrients they make and convert sun energy into chemical energy they're putting out about a third of all of that into the soil food web. They're excreting it out of the roots into the soil food web, and it's feeding bacteria and fungi directly in symbiotic relationships that plants have with bacteria and fungi. They're exchanging all of these nutrients for nutrients that the bacteria and fungi can make. An example of what they might be exchanging some bacteria for, there are nitrogen fixing bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen, which is most of the atmosphere. It's like 70-80% nitrogen, but we can't access any of it. There are special bacteria on this planet that convert atmospheric nitrogen into organic molecules that we can use. And so plants will exchange sugars and different things with those bacteria for that usable nitrogen. And then plants will use that nitrogen to turn sugars into amino acids into proteins, etc. Fungi, an example of what plants might exchange sugars, proteins, lipids, or all kinds of different, like really thousands of different types of molecules to a soil fungi organism for. Soil fungi, mycorrhizal fungi, can strip atoms off of rocks, take those atoms from mineral form and put them into organic molecules that plants and animals can use. And they do that. So it could be phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. The soil fungi are doing that in a big way. And so a lot of the minerals that become available to all of us in organic molecules are made so by soil fungi. The fungi are the master chemists of this planet. And so when we're thinking about building living soil, when we're thinking about sequestering carbon, when we're thinking about mitigating this extinction event or preserving, restoring biodiversity, we're really thinking about fungi. We're trying to create environments where fungi are going to thrive, and we're just encouraging them, and we're working with them. And of course, both plants and animals branched off of fungi after fungi were fungi. We are fungi, we're fungal strategies. We all, plants and animals, you and the tree near you, have a common fungal ancestor. And so really, there could be no life outside of the ocean without fungi. The lichens, who were the first terraformers of the planet, were, the fungi took algae and different bacteria and made these communities that were very highly functional, and like started moving out of the foam on the edge of the shore of the ocean out and began terraforming the planet. It's life outside of the ocean is possible because of fungi. And I don't know much about marine ecology, but I know that marine yeasts, that marine fungi, ocean fungi, are ubiquitous, prevalent, very significant in those ecologies as well. Fungi, which is not surprising to anybody who knows about fungi, because we all know that fungi are the master chemists of this planet. They're doing all the amazing, amazing stuff that's going on here. And when we think about plants and animals as fungal strategies, it's, then really everything awesome that we know about out here is being done by fungi. And so we're selecting for fungi. Soil fungi can strip atoms off of rocks and put them into organic molecules that plants and animals can use. They'll exchange those organic molecules with plants in exchange for sugars and different things that the plants are making. And so they have this symbiotic relationship. I'm still talking about nutrient cycling. I'm a very tangential thinker in general. I'm always at high risk for going off and forgetting what I'm talking about. So I'm making a note for myself that we're talking about nutrient cycling. I want to take a sidebar real quick to talk about the lens of competition versus the lens of cooperation. We come from this culture with this really inhumane economic model. It's a genocidal slave culture that we're survivors of and still dealing with. with a really inhumane, ecocidal, genocidal economy. And, you know, I don't know how long ago, I don't know history well. Um, you know, Darwin's hypotheses and theories were sort of perverted by a lot of the people who rationalized inhumane capitalism. And so the survival of the fittest model was sort of like applied to this inhumane form of economy we use. And so the competition model in general, which is just inherently unethical, you know, we're supposed to be helping each other. That just goes without saying. It's human nature. Um, we've been forced to extrude our worldview through this competition model for a long time. And so the last 100 years, 200 years of looking at ecology and biology, we've been forced to sort of extrude our worldview of ecology and biology through the lens of competition. And so we have the survival of the fittest model, which is not what Darwin, I mean, his ideas have been well perverted. He wasn't that crazy. He was really bright. Um, our modern interpretation of his ideas are definitely perverted. And that idea of like survival of the fittest and everything in nature is just fighting to survive till, I mean, you know, life is harsh, you know, like everybody's eating everybody, life is crazy. We all find a little niche until something eats us and then, you know, we're out. Um, you know, you can look at that as really harsh if you want to, or you can look at it as really beautiful if you want to. But the reality is not competition here on this planet. The reality is cooperation. We can't live without thousands of other species working together in concert so that we can all thrive. Biodiversity is the immune system of any ecosystem, of any individual organism. Biodiversity is our immune system, literally. Lynn Margulis, the most brilliant microbiologist in Western history, you know, she just harped on that. She said, you know, biodiversity is our immune system as human beings. You know, she said that white blood cells and whatever Western science calls the human immune system, she said is 4% of what the immune system actually is. That's all the bacteria on our skin, in our intestines, in our lungs, in our sinus cavity, on our eyeballs, in our mouth, in our ears, that determine who comes in and who comes out, what happens inside of us, everything, you know, the whole thing. She said that the white blood cells, that's like a last resort, like emergency. She said call that 4% of our immune system. And biodiversity, she, you know, and I don't know how she came up with these numbers, but, you know, I think the point is that biodiversity is our immune system. And so cooperation, we are, as one human individual, I am a community of trillions of different distinct living organisms that each have their own distinct DNA that reproduce on their own at their own moment. And we can't live without that biodiversity in us, on us, through us, you know. Cooperation, you know, you can't monocrop and have soil survive. You cannot monocrop and have soil. You know, you will lose that soil. If you start with soil and begin monocropping, you'll end with dirt in a very short amount of time. We have to, I mean, that's because this is not competition here. This is cooperation. Life is always been cooperative, highly cooperative. Lynn Margulis's books are just tremendously illuminating and inspiring and beautiful if you're interested in going down in that direction in your studies. Man, she's amazing. Most amazing, forward-thinking microbiologist in Earth's history. She never got the respect that she deserved because she was a woman, and she for sure was the most revolutionary microbiologist in Earth's history. She advanced microbiology more than all other microbiologists combined, and she's one of the most influential, profound, brilliant scientists in Western history, and does not get that credit, not even close, because she was a woman. And so, you know, at Western academia, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, I think she died around 10 years ago now, was so sexist that she was never gonna, she just isn't getting her due still to this day, but her books are amazing. Yeah, the reality here, you know, so the idea, you know, like oh, this grass is growing where I want my raspberries. The grass is competing with the raspberries. So no, nonsense. The grass is feeding all of these different microbes specific nutrients that raspberry can't provide for those microbes. So those microbes won't even be there if that grass isn't there feeding them. But that raspberry benefits from those microbes there for a number of different reasons. There's all kinds of nutrients those microbes are making available and putting into the collective nutrient cycle. And somebody eats that microbe and poops them out, and then that raspberry takes up that nutrient, be it either an ionic form of a molecule or of an atom, or a more complex molecule or something like that, you know. And then collective, now you have some legumes in there, also some clover, you have some forbs, some wildflowers. Each one of these categories, the grasses, forbs, legumes, they're all feeding different categories of microbes that are all doing different work to increase the collective nutrient cycling. So if you have grasses, forbs, and legumes growing around that raspberry plant has access to a ton of different nutrients, a ton of different medicines that it's not going to have access to otherwise, and it's going to be healthier, more nutrient dense, more vigorous, more resilient against disease, more resistant to disease and to insect attack and to powdery mildew, fungi, different things like that that can hurt sick plants. It's not going to be able to hurt that raspberry because that raspberry is in a community and has more biodiversity around it. And so what we see when we look at the reality is that competition is not reality here. I mean, it's not what's going on. What's going on here is cooperation. And one of the good things about like learning what's going on in ecology and biology is that it all feels good. It feels better. It feels good to know that we're all working together and that we're all benefiting from each other, because that's how we work as human beings, being a social animal. You know, reciprocity is human nature, as the developmental psychologists know, you know, because we're a social animal. Greed and violence is not human nature. It takes a lot of childhood trauma and stress, you know, long-term chronic stress as adults to get somebody to be greedy, selfish, mean, whatever. Human nature is kindness and reciprocity. And so when we learn that we're cooperating in these ecosystems we're part of and that everybody's helping everybody, it feels good. And so that's one of the nice things about the path of learning about regenerative ecology, is that the whole thing feels way better than all of these mythologies that we have to unlearn along the way. That was a long sidebar. We're talking about nutrient cycling. You have the sun as the energy source that's pushing all of this. It's the engine behind it. Water is the catalyst. Everybody needs water to live. Carbon structures. Carbon is the structure. The plant's made of carbon. You're made of carbon. Everybody's made of carbon. We're all carbon-based. So you have different things cycling. You have carbon cycling, water cycling, nitrogen cycling. You have individual other elements, you know, a lot of metals, magnesium, copper, cobalt, manganese, you know, stuff like that, the metals. You have fungi, soil fungi stripping atoms off of rocks, taking them from mineral form or putting them into organic molecules that plants and animals can use, and that way they can move through the ecologies. You have everybody eating everybody and peeing and pooping and burping and vomiting them out, and that's all plant food or food for other bacteria, other organisms, even, you know, insects. There are a lot of animals that eat other people's poop and then pee and poop and make more plant food, make more of those still complex molecules, more simple and then more readily available to plants. So you have a lot going on. You have all the plant matter falling to the surface and rotting there with bacteria and fungi breaking that down and peeing and pooping out plant food and food for other organisms. You have people eating those bacteria and fungi, peeing and pooping them out, making plant food and food for other organisms. And everybody eating that poop is being eaten, and they're peeing and pooping, and then the people who eat them are peeing and pooping. And so you have all of that going on. The carbon, the nitrogen, and the water cycling are kind of important to talk about. I'm going to touch on that for a second. I think a lot of us have thought some about water cycling. You know, you have oceans, these large water reservoirs. We're all, you know, 80% water. You know, we need water to live. It's the catalyst for all of this. And so evaporation from the oceans, storms, rain, plants take it up, animals eat the plants, some animals eat other animals. That water is cycling, we're peeing and pooping, it's going back into the earth. Plants are taking some of that, but some of that is evaporating the whole time. Some of when it rains, a lot of it evaporates, a lot of it moves through the rhizosphere down into the aquifer, through the soil zone, into the completely mineral zone. And once it's out of the soil zone, it can't be retained. It's just going to move until it hits bedrock, and then it's just going to follow that bedrock to a river, and then a river back to the ocean. You have evaporation going on. You have transpiration, which is like water wicking out of plants and animals. Transpiration, breath when we exhale, our metabolism, we're combusting carbon-based structures, and so carbon dioxide and H2O are two of the byproducts of the combustion that's happening. Our metabolism is combustion, it's oxidation of carbon-based molecules. So like your fireplace, combustion, and your fireplace makes carbon dioxide and water. So water going back up in the atmosphere, coming back into rain, landing, back through, moving through ecologies, into the soil food web again, into the soil again, back into plants, back into animals, back into soil, back, but then this atom evaporates, goes back into rain, comes back down. This, not atom, molecule, excuse me, H2O molecule. This molecule makes it down through all that into the aquifer and heads back, hits a river, moves through lots of bacteria and fish and back out into the river, or back into the atmosphere or something, but then those molecules make it back to the ocean. And so water cycling. Carbon cycling is very important, has everything to do with everything right now when we're in this extinction event that we triggered by turning all of the soil in the world back into atmospheric carbon, and by taking all of this sequestered carbon in the form of fossil fuels and putting that into the system. So we've triggered this extinction event. I heard Christina Jones say that we could sequester over 100 gigatons of carbon out of the atmospheres and oceans by building living soil, that we could sequester over 20 gigatons of carbon in the, that was in the form of CO2. We could sequester another 20 plus gigatons of carbon in the form of methane back into the soil by building living soil. And methane, of course, is a very significant greenhouse gas. And so carbon in the oceans, that's what's causing ocean acidification, is the high carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide just bonds naturally with water and makes carbonate, and carbonate is more acidic. The oceans, the guy had worked out a really delicate little range of pH fluctuation. We've dropped the pH way out of that range. And so, most of the coral reefs on the planet are dead now, and the rest of them are dying quickly because of that. There's all kinds of species, like we've seen, like, how starfish just fall apart and they can't deal with where the ocean pH is now. And there's, when we say that if we start measuring at the year 1800, we've already lost 20% of the macroorganisms that are known on this planet. Most of those are outside of the ocean. We don't even have a way to, we don't know enough about what's going on inside the oceans to gauge, but we know there are huge, heart-wrenching die-offs going on in the oceans. This extinction event is very significant in the oceans as well as it is out here. So carbon cycles from the atmosphere into the oceans in the form of carbonate, eventually breaks back off, comes back in as carbon dioxide, is pulled into a plant through photosynthesis, turned into a sugar, and either eaten by an animal, moves into animal form, or it's secreted out of the plant's roots into the soil food web, goes into bacteria or fungi or animals, one way or the other, and people start eating and peeing and burping, and I just farted and a little bit of carbon went back into the atmosphere, but somebody ate me. Now that carbon is in that person, and a little bit in the poop that they left, from eating me, and then a little bit in what they farted out from me. And so now this carbon's going in all directions. And so basically you have carbon going from atmosphere to ocean, to atmosphere, to plant, to the food web, and then back into atmosphere. And it goes into the soil for a long time. Soil, carbon-based, if we sequester 100, 200 gigatons of carbon out of the atmospheres in the form of soil, that soil is being held there. So in soil, you have this constant stream of carbon going in via plants through photosynthesis, being held there for a long time. In the case of humic substances, which the saprophytic fungi make, it's being held there for a very long time, potentially, like thousands of years or something, hundreds of thousands of millions of years being held there. You have like huge algal blooms in the ocean sometimes, and they fall, and eventually you have like shale, coal, petroleum, stuff like that. You have the Earth sequestering carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to get those atmospheric levels right where Earth wants. But that takes a very long time. It doesn't look like our species has that much time left. It's it's kind of on us to do this right now, to build living soil again as quickly as we possibly can, to mitigate this extinction event to whatever extent is possible. And we have some say over how serious, how extensive this extinction event is going to turn out. We have some say right now. We still have a little bit of say in that. And that's why I'm talking to you about this today. So carbon cycling, water cycling, just moving through, in and out, and back up in the air, back in the oceans, back in the air, back into the soil, back into the soil, back into the food web, back into our ecologies here, our terrestrial ecologies. Same thing with carbon. You have carbon moving from atmosphere, ocean, atmosphere, soil, food web. Soil can hold carbon. Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. Soil, you have this constant stream of carbon coming in, you have a constant stream coming out, because things are always being eaten, peeing, pooped. You always have gamma rays coming in, hits this humic substance, bam, something breaks off, you just have this constant stream. But what's going on ecologically above ground has everything to do with how much carbon's coming in, how much carbon is leaving. We have these really simple techniques for increasing the rate of carbon infiltration to where it's much greater than the rate of carbon leaving. And that matters a lot. Nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, nitrogen fixing bacteria that turn atmospheric gas, nitrogen into gas, into organic molecules, ammonia, ammonium, whatever, that plants can use and turn into proteins, and then we're eating, we have the amino acids and proteins, so we're using that nitrogen, peeing, poop, fart, something, burp, thing, I don't know, fire, nitrogen gas back in the atmosphere. So same thing with nitrogen, you have this cycling that's going on constantly. The smaller, all those other nutrients, the other 20, 40, who knows how many plants really use, animals really use, you have bacteria and fungi, predominantly fungi, that are stripping atoms off of rocks, putting them from mineral form into an organic molecule we can use. We use it, it cycles. I eat this plant, this animal eats me, poops some out, some magnesium out, some beetle eats that, a bird eats that, pisses it out, a plant takes it up, deer eats that plant, so you have these you have all of these minerals cycling because of the soil fungi. A lot of mycorrhizal fungi, especially endo and ecto mycorrhizal fungi, and then everybody eating everybody. So, okay, nutrient cycling. You have things moving, and of course, sunlight is the energy source for all of that. And that energy gets turned into chemical energy during photosynthesis, and that chemical energy is what we're all using. Just when we're eating each other, we're getting chemical energy. That energy was put into that form via, it was sunlight, it's sun energy that's being put into chemical form that we're all using for all our energy. Well, energy I'm using to talk and to vibrate matter with right now, the chemical energy from that, from the sun via photosynthesis. So the what you can do is really important. Looks like we're getting close to an hour. The what you can do, this is the part I like, because it looks really bleak, the extinction event that we're witnessing and experiencing together, the climate change, the huge climate shifts that we're all experiencing everywhere on this planet. It's really, really bleak. And so it's easy for a lot of us to have those moments where we're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? This is terrible. And if you don't feel that you have some agency in what's happening in your environment, then that's very stressful. We need to feel that we have some control of our immediate environment, just to have like emotional, chemical, neurological homeostasis, to be able to come back to homeostasis. We have to feel that we have some control of our immediate environment. And in this horrific moment in human history and Earth history, there's so much terrible shit happening that we don't, perceive to have much control over as individuals. It just sucks to like day in, day out, know about, think about, hear about, and just be like, oh shit, that's happening. You know, it's gross if you don't feel that you have some control over it. The good thing about this, and you know, my favorite part of doing these talks, the reason I'm doing these talks is because we do have some control over this. We have a lot of say. Whatever land you are steward for, whether it's your backyard, a raised bed, a small garden, large garden, a vacant lot, a farm, a ranch, whatever it is, if there's some wild land near you that nobody is going to know that you're fucking with, fuck with it in a good, healthy way. Do regenerative. I mean, you know, I mean, the main problem here is humans fucking with shit, right? So don't do it. You know, I mean, you know, we have this desire to mess with stuff, and really leave it alone is usually the best. But there are some techniques that, you know, that are really simple, that can help change whatever that human use of that land has been into something that's going to be much more advantageous in terms of carbon sequestration and, you know, restoring biodiversity, etc. And it's really simple stuff, you know, no-till. There are these NASA maps that show, you know, I don't know, maybe like every day, it's just like this, you know, a hundredth of, or 30th of a second of each day of the year of like North America. And it shows carbon dioxide levels over North America. Come spring, carbon dioxide levels go up crazy all over the Northern Hemisphere when it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere, because everybody's tilling. And that's mindless. It's idiotic. We know better now. We've known better for a long time, and we're still doing it. We're bringing so much carbon back out of the soil food web, all that carbon that should be sequestered in soil. We're ruining those ecologies, we're ruining that chemistry, and we're letting so much carbon come back in the atmosphere every year, every spring when we till. Tilling releases carbon, tilling kills soil, tilling destroys the biodiversity of the soil food web. Tilling is bad for plants and animals. It's mindless. At this point, it's idiotic because science knows better. There's no reason. Don't till, no till. No till, no fertilization, super biodiverse polyculture, full ground cover, mulch, begin with mulching. That's basically the gist of it. So say you have, you know, you moved into a duplex and you have a small backyard that's just like dead dirt with some like weeds with early successional species. The immune system response of Mother Earth. Don't hate on weeds. They're beautiful and they're highly nutrient dense. They're good food, good medicine, and they're friends. So don't fight them. But say you're starting in that situation where you're just a bunch of dead dirt and some early successional, just a plant here, a plant there, you know, and you identify them as weeds and you want healthy, beautiful life there. What do you do? First thing you do is mulch. If it's a small area like that, you can mulch. You can find leaf litter. There's free wood chips everywhere. Tree companies everywhere, free wood chips. Power companies everywhere, free wood chips. Saw a beautiful little documentary on his brother in LA. He had the most amazing food forest in his backyard. He said he started by just collecting free wood chips, built like 4 feet high in his backyard, whole backyard, 4 feet of wood chips. He said next year was 2 feet. It decomposed that much. And he just added more, another 2 feet, and then let it go. And once the trees and bushes, everybody established, and they're all putting organic matter, they're mulching. Once you have plants there, they're doing all the mulching. You don't have to do it anymore. But to begin with, mulch. The most important thing you can do, if you have a small something, if you're working on like acres, you probably can't mulch acres. That's probably not accessible to you. So, you know, if you're like working with a large farm or a ranch or something like that, you can skip step 1, go straight to line 3. But for anybody who has the capacity to mulch whatever area you're steward for, the most important thing, wood. It's really important to have wood there. Saprophytic fungi eating lignin are the ones who make the humic substances. We're really aiming to get systems back to at least savanna or deciduous forest stages of succession, of ecological succession, because saprophytic fungi eating lignin, which is the hard stuff of trees, shrubs, and vines, at the surface of the earth, they're the ones that make the humic substances. And the humic substances are like the tremendous, tremendous stuff. Once you start getting humic substances into your soil food web, your soil chemistry, then amazing, beautiful things can happen, and you're really sequestering carbon at that point. And so we're really kind of aiming to get there. Grassland is better than desert. Um, I, I'm going to try to get through the what you can do in time to talk about ecological succession a little bit. It's really important to understand that concept and what we're talking about when we're talking about moving a desert to a short prairie grassland, to a tall prairie grassland, to a savanna, to a deciduous forest, to a coniferous forest. Um, what that means chemically, biologically, in terms of biodiversity, um, you know, why, what's more resilient, why, what's sequestering more carbon, why, and then the relationship between bacteria and fungi in those different stages of ecological succession. That all matters. That's kind of like 200s level. It's sort of like the next course, but I'll try to touch on that a little bit today. The what you can do, mulch. After that, we're aiming, and I mean a lot, like 6, 8, 12 inches, doesn't, and anything you can, brown or woody is how Elaine Ingham calls it, brown or woody. So brown means, you know, once leaves have turned yellow in the fall, all of the nutrients have been pulled out of those leaves and put back into the roots to, you know, safeguard over the winter. Except for most of the carbon, the leaves, brown leaves, yellow leaves, brown grass, straw, this yellow, when things die, when all those nutrients are pulled out of them, that's what's happening, is the nutrients are being pulled out, put into the root zones, and stored over winter in the case of perennials, or if they're annual plants, they're just being gifted back to the soil ecology, because again, everything here is cooperation, and that will benefit that plant's next generation and, you know, successive generations. And so what you're left with are these carbon structures, and carbon structures feed bacteria and fungi. The really complex carbon structures like lignin feed saprophytic fungi mostly. There's some exceptions to those rules, you know, but it's mostly fungi who have the capacity, who have the genes to make the enzymes that can break down lignin. And when saprophytic fungi break down lignin, they create humic substances. Humus is made by saprophytic fungi breaking down lignin at the surface of the earth. That's very important to know. There's a general rule: the more food sources in a system, the more biodiversity that can be had in that system. So the more food sources, more types of plant matter you put into your compost, the more biodiversity is possible from that compost. The more types of plant matter that you put into your mulch, the more biodiversity is possible in that mulch. And so if you can get all different types of plants, but mostly brown or woody, then you're in a great place. You're feeding bacteria and fungi, and you're especially feeding fungi. The reason we do brown and woody is because if there's a lot of nitrogen in it, or if there's a lot of sugars, like if you just piled 4 foot of food waste in your backyard, you would have this slurry that would turn anaerobic very quickly. If it were all green matter, you would have heat, a ton of heat. You have bacteria eating all of that chlorophyll and putting out a ton of heat, and you wouldn't have healthy ecology, like soil ecology underneath that. You would not have a healthy environment for roots. You wouldn't have the bacteria and fungi thriving that plants want to be in cooperation with. Let me touch on the aerobic versus anaerobic thing very quickly. Very quick sidebar here. We are aerobic organisms. Plants, animals, most fungi are aerobic organisms. And so all of the plants, animals, and fungi that are beneficial to us, not all of them, there's some exceptions to that, you know, kombucha, sauerkraut, etc. They're all, they're mostly, the vast majority are aerobic organisms. Healthy soil is an aerobic ecology, an aerobic ecosystem. Humic substances allow gas transport so that aerobic organisms can stay aerobic. All of the pathogens, and I could be wrong here, I've not discovered any exception to this rule, and I've never had any scientist, any microbiologist, anybody who knows, who might know better than me, ever correct me on this when they've heard me say this in front of them. So I'm assuming that this is true until I find an example that disproves this, a single example that disproves what I'm about to say. Every single pathogen, as far as I know, you know, Salmonella, E. coli, whatever you're afraid of, whatever pathogen you're afraid of, every single pathogen is an anaerobic organism. So we're trying to cultivate aerobic life in soil, in the food web, in ecology, in soil ecosystems, in the soil food web. We're definitely cultivating aerobic always. exceptions, like, I mean, exceptions to, okay, so not all anaerobic organisms are bad, all detrimental. All detrimental organisms are anaerobic. Not all anaerobic organisms are bad, all detrimental organisms are aerobic, and there are no aerobic pathogens. As far as I know, I've never heard of an example to counter that. So I really feel that that's, like, I can make that as an absolute statement right now. If it's not absolutely true, there are rare exceptions to that. That's generally the rule here. So we're really trying to cultivate aerobic systems. We're always thinking about making things aerobic. You put 4 feet of food waste in your backyard, you can have a ton of anaerobic organisms. All plant pathogens are anaerobic. Every organism which is detrimental to plant roots is, every microbe which is detrimental to plant roots is anaerobic. Gophers and moles eat plant roots. So we're definitely trying to cultivate aerobic systems here. Sidebar done. We're still talking about about what you can do. So mulch with brown, woody, no-till, mulch, don't ever till, don't turn that, don't do it. I mean, so the mythology around tilling is that it's compacted and not aerobic. You till it once, you can have more aerobic for a month until the water because everything that was holding it apart, the carbon-based molecules that were holding it, the little spaces that were there are now gone. So now it's going to end up more compacted than it was before you plowed it, tilled it. Don't till. It's asinine at this point. Just leave it alone, let it go, let that go. That's a very, very bad technology from like thousands of years ago when we were stoning women to death for coming home drunk. Let that go. Don't till, mulch, brown woody, natural fertilization, not organic, like organic, like organic, like still chemical warfare, it's still destroying, there's no life in the soil in an organic farm, Biodynamic, there's a little bit of life. In a regenerative horticulture situation, you have a ton of life. In a super biodiverse polyculture, farm, you have a ton of life there, and you don't have any compaction at all. So, so I forget what I was talking about. Natural fertilization versus organic. Obviously, organic everything. Don't ever use any synthetic chemicals. If you don't have to use them on your body, in your body, don't ever bring them into your house. If you don't have to, definitely don't put them into your garden ever. There's no reason ever to put any synthetic chemical into your garden. It's not deficient of any nutrient, it's deficient of the life making those nutrients available. Don't do anything synthetic. And so with fertilization, don't use organic fertilizers. They're salts the way synthetic fertilizers are. Same thing. They're derived from organic sources. These salts, these bottle of salts in liquid form, is derived, or if it's organic, it's derived from an organic source as opposed to a synthetic fertilizer, which are salts derived from fossil fuels. But it doesn't matter what they're derived from. You have a bottle of salts, and you pour a bottle of salt into the soil, you increase salinity, suck water out of all the life forms down there via osmosis, and I don't know, I'm not a chemist, and kill. It's chemical warfare. It's the same chemical warfare model on all of the soil ecology, all the soil life, soil biology. Just leave them alone. Don't do that. Natural fertilization is the peeing and the pooping. Pee in your garden. If you're eating healthy, if you're eating organic, you're not taking pharmaceuticals, you're not taking any BS, no preservatives, you're not doing anything, if you're eating what you're supposed to be eating, pee in the garden. Honestly, poop in the garden. If it's an aerobic system, any pathogen you have in your poop can't survive there. It's going to be dead in a day or two, And I know that's gross. Everybody's uncomfortable with pee and poop. We're Puritans still. I implore you to become comfortable with your pee and poop and with everyone's pee and poop, because that is the nutrient cycling. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're doing here, is just everybody eating everybody and peeing and pooping them out. And that feeds plants, which feeds us again. And it's just like, like there's no life without death. There's no life without pee and poop. Please become comfortable with it. We really have to. It's psychotic that we're taking all of these nutrients out of farmland, putting them into our bodies, peeing and pooping into rivers, and sending that all to the oceans. All those nutrients need to be cycling in those ecosystems. We need to be giving them back to the ecosystems that we're taking them from, those nutrients, those individual atoms. We need to be giving them back to those systems that we're taking them from. It is raining here in the desert on the south side of the Gila. Thank Gaia. Oh, that makes me feel nice. Oh boy, I hope it's raining where everybody watching this is right now. Natural fertilization. Put your food waste on top of the mulch that you put out there. Pee and poop there. If you're too afraid of human poop, if that's too gross for you, I hope you're feeding your dogs or cats like a whole foods organic diet, like you're cooking whole foods for them. Kibble, niche niche. Don't fucking meat Fritos. Don't feed your dogs that shit. Give them a whole foods organic diet the way you're eating. Yeah, I'm not gonna be too pushy. I'm not gonna should all over you, but I'm gonna should a little bit in your direction. It's healthier to eat a whole foods organic diet, healthier for your dog. If your dog's eating healthier, whole foods organic diet, their poop will turn to soil in days. You know, it doesn't stink, it doesn't stick around, it doesn't linger. And then healthier plants, healthier ecology, everything. And so potted plants, it's especially important there. You know, pee in your potted plants, put your food waste on top of the mulch that you've put there. But with the potted plants, because you know there's a limited amount of even if you have a healthy ecology in there, there's just not that. Say your pot is like yay big and your plant is this big. You know, there's only so many nutrients per day, so many atoms per day that that plant can be getting. So you need to be adding because that plant's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it's just. I mean, you can be having to add to it. Natural fertilization, mulch for the environment, the chemical, physical, ecological, biological environment that plants and fungi, that bacteria and fungi can thrive in. And then you're adding a little bit of pee, a little bit of your dog's whole food organic diet, dog poop, a little bit of your food waste onto the surface, and the bacteria and fungi, everybody's like, yeah, just going crazy. All the nematodes, the microarthropods, any worms in there, like, yeah, eating the bacteria and everything. They're all peeing, and then they're making all those nutrients available to the plant. That's natural fertilization because that's the way it happens on Earth. You have plant matter, pee, poop, falling to the surface constantly onto the leaf litter, you know, the detritus, I don't know, there's scientific, but you know, the leaf litter, that's natural, that's how it's supposed to happen. If you're gardening, if you're farming, for sure, pee, poop, plant matter. And that's why, you know, biodiversity, you don't fight the moles, you don't fight the mice, you don't fight the eagles, the rabbits, the deer, anybody, because they're all peeing and pooping, they're all helping. It's not competition. You know, if you're not growing enough for everybody, then, I mean, what do you, like, it doesn't feel good to be like, this is mine, you're mine, you stay away, this is mine. Just corn for me, just my family, me. Like that doesn't feel good. You know, if you get to the point where you're like, all right, well, we're sharing with everybody, we're in community with everybody, you know, God, biodiverse polyculture farming, regenerative horticulture feels good. You are sharing with everybody, you're growing enough for everybody. You're going to get some of those squashes, you're going to get some of the whatever, everybody else is going to get a ton. And then you can do wildland restoration to where you're increasing the area. Like you have this little farm right here that you're doing, you know, regenerative ecology on, regenerative horticulture. Every animal in that county is coming and they're all eating it. You're like, why? This doesn't work. I don't get any food out of it. But now you're doing wildland restoration. You're increasing biodiversity in the area. You stop fighting all those animals and stuff. All those animals coming to and leaving your farm is increasing the health of the ecosystems around your farm. And you're planting trees and bushes and grasses, forbs, and legumes in the area around there and creating these forest zones and stuff. And now all these animals are coming from everywhere. The birds and their migratory paths are stopping and bringing nutrients from elsewhere. And they're just increasing the biomass and the biodiversity of the area around. And now it's just growing and growing and growing. And now nobody has to come like focus and concentrate on your garden, your plot, your farm. Now they're not intensively all now because there's food elsewhere. And you're going to see 1,000 beetles that you've never seen before. You'll see 100 in a year. You'll see 100 beetles in a year that you've never seen before. They're just beautiful. 1,000 bee species that you've never seen before that are beautiful. 1,000 bird or 100 new bird species you'll see, you know, that you've never seen before that are beautiful. Bird songs that you've never heard before that are beautiful and so beautiful. It's like enriching. It's really nourishing on so many levels to do this work. no-till, natural fertilization, mulch, not necessarily in that order, but always, all the time. Biodiverse polyculture, we're still talking about what you can do on whatever land you are steward for. Biodiverse polyculture, you can't monocrop and have anything healthy. We talk about grasses, forbs, and legumes. If you're starting with dead dirt and wanting to move back into like grassland to like savanna type ecology, then you're going to want to start with grasses, forbs, and legumes. And I live in the desert. I've lived in the desert for a long time, so that's kind of where we start. If you live in a tropical rainforest right now, skip to line 14. Get back at me. Like, hit me up. wildcatgaia@gmail.com. Technically mine. I never check email. I'm not into internet. This is the first time I've ever done Zoom anything. My phone number, 505-603 2129. It's a United States phone number, so +1 at the beginning. Text is best for me. I'm usually not near my phone, but I'll get back to you. I check email once every other month or something like that. I'll get back to you. wildcatgaia@gmail.com, +1 505-603 2129. Sharing these technologies is my spiritual path. It's my passion, profession, everything. It's what I'm here to do. It's the mudra I'm going to leave, the mudra that I want my life to be. So I'll share knowledge with you freely. I'll help you with whatever your intention is with the land that you're steward for, whatever relationship you want to have with that land. I can help you do it in a way that's beneficial to the ecology of that land and to the ecologies around that land. If you have any questions ever, please get a hold of me. Don't be shy. No Facebook, no anything like. I don't do social media. That's not my thing. So those are the ways to get a hold of me. Biodiverse polyculture. Vandana Shiva says biodiversity is the immune system of Mother Earth. Lynn Margulis says that biodiversity is our immune system. Biodiversity is health. It is vigor. It is it's beauty, it's nourishment, it's everything good. It's what we're doing, and you can't sequester, you can't build living soil without biodiversity. And so Three Sisters is closer to monocropping than it is to biodiverse polyculture. I'm talking about like 220 species on an acre, ideally. And so if you're starting in sort of like, if you're in a desert environment, you're probably starting with desert, you want to be moving towards grasslands to savanna, then you want representatives of each of three categories: grasses, forbs, legumes. Grasses, forbs, legumes. We know what grasses are. And now, grasses, rushes, sedges, there's a lot of variation in there. There's many species possible of each of those three categories: grasses, forbs, legumes. As many species as possible of each of those. As many grasses as you can have. Forbs, the broad-leafed flowering plants. Anything that's got like, anything, it's not a grass, it's not a tree, shrub, or vine. It's none of those weird like fern, random little niche thing that you're like, what is that? Just everything else, all the wildflowers, most of the vegetables, most of the herbs, just everything else. Most plants are forbs. Legumes, really not necessarily just legumes, vetches, other things that work with, these are special categories of plants that work with the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So if you have those plants that work with the nitrogen fixing bacteria, legumes, vetches, lupines, there's some others, then you have atmospheric nitrogen being added. So you're bringing nitrogen fertilizer into your system. You don't need to add nitrogen fertilizer. You need to have plants that work with the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So grasses, forbs, legumes. And when I say legumes, I mean legumes, vetches, lupines. You can do the research to figure out who those other categories of plants are that work with the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So if you have 220 different species on an acre, or as many species, at least one of each. The Three Sisters is great for a potted plant. Like if you have a plant in a pot, even if it's like a tree or a shrub or a vine, still have a grass, a forb, and a legume in there, and be mulching and be putting a little bit of food waste. With the potted plants, so you don't want to add too much food waste. Again, you don't want to make this slurry that turns anaerobic and gets gross. You don't want to cover it with like a mound of human poop, and that's gross. What you want to do is sort of like just a little bit on occasion. And when you notice that you can't identify that as like a banana peel anymore, then you put your apple core on it. you pee on it once a week, you know? If your pee is really clear, if you eat really healthy, you drink a ton of water, your pee is really clear, you can pee on that plant once a day, probably, you know? Salt buildup, people are weird about pee, like, you know, salt, pee, salt, build, salinity, whatever. It doesn't matter, the fungi, in a healthy ecosystem, you don't have to worry about salt, salinity, you don't have to worry about pH, you don't have to worry about freaking anything in a healthy ecosystem. The soil fungi, the fungi are the master chemists of this planet. Soil fungi, saprophytic fungi at the surface, mycorrhizal fungi underneath, all the yeast, everybody, the fungi are the master chemists of this planet. There is never a salinity problem, never a pH problem, anything like that. If you have soil fungi, if you have a healthy ecosystem, you don't have to worry about anything. Mother Earth got this worked out. She got way better systems than you got. And like all the way through, you know, like don't compost. Why are you going to compost? Like put that shit on the surface and let the natural systems handle it. Mother Earth got better systems than you got, and she worked it out like 4.5 billion years ago. There were better systems than we got. Let Mother Earth do it the natural way, natural fertilization. Super biodiverse polyculture, the more biodiversity, the more resilient that system is going to be. And a little like footnote there is that it's really important to learn about ecological succession because these clades that work together, you know, if you have like some desert plants and you go put them in, okay, so if you start with this plot of dead dirt and you bring some desert plants, some tropical rainforest plants, and some like wetland riparian area plants and put them together, they're going to be feeding different microbes. I mean, even if they had like the chemical environment that they all needed to survive, even if they survived somehow, all survived, they're trying to feed different microbes that aren't helping each other. They're not evolved to help each other. We've evolved in these clades. And so the different stages of succession, like in a grassland, all of the plants feed this specific profile of biodiversity of like bacteria and fungi that all those plants have evolved to work with. Same in a savanna, in like a deciduous forest, it's different clades for them. There's probably a lot of overlap there, Venn diagram, but they're different. And so the forest plants are feeding forest microbes, soil microbes, that other forest plants have evolved to benefit from. Grassland plants are feeding grassland microbes that other grassland plants have evolved to benefit from. And so there's some, it's, you know, it's like 200s level thinking. And when we're thinking about biodiversity, like when I'm doing biodiversity, when I'm bringing biodiversity into an area, I'm thinking about where it is in ecological succession, where I want to take it in ecological succession. And I'm planting specific clades of plants based on that, you know, like a bunch where it is, but then some that are just like gently coaxing it forward through ecological succession towards where we want it to go, you know, rather than just being like incoherent about bringing in plants from all different stages of succession. There's not a great website. It looks like I'm going to have to do the freaking database myself. I don't know. This just doesn't exist in the English language. I bet you it exists in Russian and or like, you know, Mandarin or some Cantonese or something like that. Yeah, 200s level. Hit me up if you have questions about like who to plant with who. Hit me up and I'll try to put together that resource at some point. If anybody wants to loan me $10,000 to do that, hit me up. Super biodiverse polyculture. We can't be growing, you know, Three Sisters it's basically monocropping. If you're in a pot, you know, you don't have much room. Three Sisters, perfect, beautiful. And now, so look at that real quick. The beauty, all these technologies our ancestors had forever, you know, look at the wisdom there. Corn, beans, squash, Three Sisters. If you know what I'm talking about, the Three Sisters are corns, beans, and squash. And we say like native people used to grow them together. It was beneficial. Corn, grass, beans, legume, squash, forb. Grasses, forbs, legumes. Corn, beans, squash. Look at that beautiful technology our indigenous ancestors left us. Now, you know, it's a simple way to like pass that technology forward through generations. But really what we need is super biodiverse polyculture. We're aiming for 220 species growing together. After that, full ground cover. So no-till, mulch everything, natural fertilization, super biodiverse polyculture. Number 5 here of what you can do. What did I say? What did I just say? Full photosynthetic ground cover. You want leaf, you don't want any sunlight hitting that mulch layer ever. You want all sunlight being used for photosynthesis. And eventually canopies, stories, plants that use different amounts of, because we're moving from like desert to grassland to savanna to deciduous forest. Deciduous forest is a nice place to stay for humans because that's where we get the most calories from. And so it's a lovely place to be. Full photosynthetic ground cover. You want like green solar panels covering the earth, leaves covering the earth of all 220 different species of plants, all growing together. You start with full mulch ground cover and you move to full photosynthetic ground cover. That was number 5. Let me see, leave it there. Chop and drop. Don't ever pull roots up out of the ground. That is tilling, but also it's pulling that food. Roots are food for bacteria and fungi. If there's a plant that you don't want there, first of all, don't be a hater. But second of all, if you're like, I am a hater, I'm going to kill this plant. Chop it at the ground level or a little bit higher. Leave some habitat up here, some mulch above ground. Chop it, drop it, leave it there. Leave that shit there. Whatever leaves fall there, leave them there. Big ass branch falls out of your tree, almost hits your car. You're like, oh, thank God, it didn't hit my car. Leave it there. Like, well, I need to chip it, but no, you don't. That big branch sitting there on the ground is home for unknown number of species of bees, beetles, all kinds of things that are very important for that local ecology. Leave it there. All of the fungi, the different types of fungi, the primary decomposers, the secondary decomposers are going to come in after the first ones, turn that lignin into something else. Then you have these other fungi, blah, blah, that shit. You're going to lose so much biodiversity if you chip that shit and then spread. Leave it as is. Leave it. Whatever hits your earth, leave it there. Don't take your grass clippings elsewhere. If you mow your lawn, you can do that once a year and it's beneficial. You do that 20 times a year, it's detrimental. You mow your lawn once a year, twice if it's a healthy, getting lots of water. And that's beneficial as long as you're mowing it like tall. Don't mow it like short. You mow it tall, like 6 inches. You mow it to 6 inches once a year. You're doing a benefit to the earth if you leave those grass clippings there. Whatever it is, leave it there. So if you decide like, I am a hater, I'm going to kill this plant, chop and drop. Leave it there. Always leave it there. Chop and drop. Don't ever pull roots. That's tilling. Don't do that. Chop and drop, because if you take it and you throw it away or you put it in your compost, whatever, you just took those nutrients that came from that ecosystem, that local ecology that wanted to go back into. It's supposed to be cycling. All these nutrients are supposed to be cycling. Don't interrupt the nutrient cycling. So I'm imploring you to please think about nutrient cycling, and through that lens, leave it there. So we're at an hour and a half. It's 8 o'clock. And I'm just going to keep pushing my hippie shtick. Yeah, I don't. Alana's computer died, the host. Alana, who runs High Frequency Lofts up in Taos, this is a fundraiser for those lofts, not for Alana specifically, but she has used the High Frequency Lofts venue as a place to cultivate community in northern New Mexico for a long time, and has benefited many communities in northern New Mexico for a long time greatly. And I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for Alana, and that's why I do this, because it's my thing, but I'm doing this in this context here as a part of the fundraiser to help keep High Frequency Lofts in the community and as a resource for the communities in northern New Mexico and even southern Colorado. They're a great benefit to a lot of people. I mean, that loft, the loft is a single loft. I think it might be singular, not plural there, but yeah, Alana is a wonderful person who's done great service for many communities for a long time, who I really appreciate and respect. Thank you, Alana. This is part of a fundraiser for her. There's a link on the Facebook page. This is streaming live on Facebook. If you'd like to donate, please do. If you're watching on Zoom and don't have a copy of that link, hit me up, 505-603-2129. I'll send you a link for the donation page. Please do donate to her, or to High Frequency Lofts specifically. So we got leave it there, leave it there. I know you want to move that branch, don't move that branch. You're like, oh, but this grass makes the soil acidic. And they said, man, the idiot at the freaking nursery who doesn't know anything about ecology, doesn't know anything about, epidemiology, anything about botany, nothing. Like, that person at the nursery said X, Y, and Z. And so I'm going to do this obscenely neurotic thing. And I'm going to take all this organic matter that came from this ecosystem. I'm going to move it over here because I just feel like I have to tamper with things. Don't. Just relax that. Relax it. Let it go. Leave it there. If it came from there, it wants to go back there. If you have healthy ecology, acidity is not a problem. pH is not a problem, whatever it is. I've heard people say, if I leave the grass, it'll make it more acidic. Like, oh, that's not a real thing. That's not a real concern. That's not legitimate. I don't honor that concern. I hear it. I respect the emotional experience. I respect the person. But what we need now is carbon sequestration and to all be stewards and to all preserve and restore biodiversity. So let's do that now. Let's move away from what we've been doing and let's move towards like increasing and preserving biodiversity, increasing carbon sequestration. Chop and drop, don't pull it up by the roots. If you kill it, leave it there. If it falls, leave it there. So that might be 6. No-till, mulch, natural fertilization, super biodiverse polyculture, full photosynthetic ground cover, leave it there. So that's 6. I already talked about like composting versus spread it. Mother Earth has a better system. Just put it on top of the earth where it's supposed to be. Mother Earth can do it properly. Yeah, there we go, a rhyme. Yeah, that's it. The only reason you would compost that's like a legitimate, intelligent reason to compost is to create an inoculant source to increase the biodiversity in an area, to just inoculate an environment, an ecosystem that you're trying to like kickstart into a healthier system. In order to do that effectively, you have to have real education on composting. If you want to take Elaine Ingham's like Life in the Soil classes, this is like, college level shit. It's like real learning, real microbiology, like real biology, real botany, real ecology. If you want to pay thousands of dollars to learn from Elaine and become an actual like person who knows how to compost, because you have like real scientific education in how to compost properly in order to select for aerobic organisms, in order to select for a huge biodiversity of aerobic organisms, and then not make one mistake the whole time and do a ton of work, unless you do Johnson-Su composting. Also look up Johnson-Su composting. If you really do want a good inoculant source to kickstart things, there's this new technology that's just freaking tremendous. David Johnson and Christina Su, New Mexico State University just created this new composting technology a decade ago or so. It's just like tremendous. Johnson-Su, S-U, Johnson-Su, they call it bioreactors, Valmorpher, Schnarfenite. It's compost. It's a composting technology. So if you want to make a compost, if you want to compost at all, learn Johnson-Su composting technology. That's the way to do it. That's the easiest way to make a super biodiverse aerobic inoculant source. But what are you doing that for? Just do everything right. Just mulch, plant biodiversity, no-till, full photosynthetic ground cover, natural fertilization. Just do things right. And you don't have to do that. Mother Earth has a better system. All that biodiversity will come if you just do the right thing. If you stop doing the wrong thing, the biodiversity will come. If you just leave it alone, the biodiversity will come. If you mulch and you do something, you bring in those species, bring in that biodiversity right now, you can accelerate the rate at which Mother Earth is going to do the right thing on her own. Just quit doing the wrong thing at least. But there's really for most of us, there's no reason to compost. You don't need to do that. You just do the right thing and you're going to get the biodiversity that you want. So that's what you can do. I'm just going to talk real quick about ecological succession and then I'll let you go. I really appreciate anybody who's watching this live. I appreciate anybody, this is being recorded. If you watch this in the future, thank you for your interest. Thank you for caring. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Ecological succession. I spoke on why it's important to know this. The further we are in ecological succession, the more carbon is being sequestered. The further we are along in ecological succession, I think it might actually, I think biodiversity might max out around deciduous forest. So let me talk about, there's this real oversimplified model. It really doesn't, I mean, it's a model. It's a very simple model so that human brains can sort of have like a little understanding of it. The complexity of ecological and biological systems are orders of magnitude more than what human brains can ever know through the lens of Western science. We can't know the complexity of these systems, through Western science. We never will. I don't know. Yeah, that's my hippie agenda. I'll let that go. Ecological succession, a very oversimplified model. We have this, you imagine like one axis, and you have like, on one side, you're starting with like desert ecology, and then you move towards short prairie grassland, and then towards tall prairie grassland, then savanna. And most people don't know really savanna. Savanna is like grasslands with like some trees here and there, some vines, some shrubs, a lot of bushes and stuff. But you still have like lots of grasses, forbs, and legumes everywhere. So like grassland with trees here and there, shrubs here, patches of shrubs, vines, things crawling up, but still lots of like open area where you could dance, run around, play soccer, if it's flat, or it's not full woods, it's not forest yet. Desert, short prairie grassland, tall prairie grassland, savanna. Now you're getting some trees, shrubs, and vines, and that's very significant because they make lignin. Saprophytic fungi turn lignin into humic substances. So now this is like the whoa, savanna. Deciduous forest, as opposed to coniferous forest. Deciduous are just things that aren't evergreens, right? Very, excuse my ignorance there. I don't have a better definition. Deciduous forests have a ton of calories for human beings, and so those are great for us. Coniferous forest, old growth coniferous forest. The further along you are down the scale of succession, the more carbon sequestration is happening there. That's really significant right now. We've triggered an extinction event by putting a ton of carbon up in the atmosphere, and we need to mitigate this to whatever extent is possible before our species is gone. We just need to do the right thing just because it's the right thing. Even if we don't think we can save our species now, we still need to try to mitigate this extinction event to whatever extent is possible. Just do the right thing because it's the right thing, Ecological succession, it kind of matters, because if you're trying to plant coherently, if you, a lot of like row crops, for instance, are very early successional, either like the brassicas are just earliest successional, like weeds, or, your grains are like, grassland at most, but then say strawberries is a forest crop. And so if you're trying to grow strawberries and brassicas together, that's not going to work well. I think brassicas will grow in a forest soil ecology, but as long as they've got light, they won't grow under a forest canopy very well, but they'll grow with that biodiversity. But the strawberries are not going to grow in a desert soil ecology. And so if you want to grow strawberries, it would be wise to be growing them under trees, basically, but at the very least, you're going to want to add a lot of wood mulch so that you have saprophytic fungi and like all the organisms that live under wood mulch, like in a forest. And then thinking, then maybe like shrubs and vines and things like that, things that can live later on in further down the scale of ecological succession. And I kind of touched on it earlier, all plants have evolved to live in these clades of and to benefit from the bacteria and fungi that have evolved to live in, symbiotically with the other plants that live in that stage, that slice of ecological succession, that type of ecosystem. So it makes some sense to think about that and plant coherently and choose those plant clades coherently so that all the plants you put together in one area will benefit each other, and specifically will select for the types of microbes and fungi, which are mostly macrobes, that the other plants that you're growing with them are going to benefit from, you know. And then if you want, so, you know, if you're going to grow, if you want to grow brassicas, grow them together with other early successional plants and like a large biodiversity there. You want your strawberries there, grow them with later, so grow them with your hops, your ganja, your raspberries and blackberries and stuff like currants, with some fruit trees, you know, stuff like that. Grow them in your orchard. Grow strawberries under your orchard, you know? And so that's just like a simple example of why to think about that. Just generally, the fungi to bacteria ratios are very low. Fungi to bacteria ratio, like fungi numerator, bacteria denominator, fungi to bacteria ratios, very low early in succession. In the desert, there's very little fungi biomass there. And there's very little bacteria biomass. The total fungi and bacteria biomass is very low also. As you move through ecological succession, the total biomass of both fungi and bacteria is increasing, like exponentially-ish. And at the same time, the ratio of fungi to bacteria, the fungi to bacteria ratio, it starts out way more bacteria biomass than fungi biomass in desert. And through like somewhere around like grassland, you get to like a 1-to-1 ratio of fungi to bacteria. And by like savanna, you're like 30 or so, you know, 100-to-1. In deciduous forest, you can be 1,000-to-1 coniferous, 10,000, 100,000-to-1 fungi to bacteria ratio in old growth coniferous forest, 1,000,000-to-1, I think. And so that's significant for reasons I'll touch on in the next class. There's not another class scheduled here, but you know, please find me if you're interested in learning. Resources, Elaine Ingham, of course, Soil Food Web, Life in the Soil, whatever that is. I think her old one is gone and she's got a new one that's even more expensive. Telluride Mushroom Festival. If you're interested in ecology or biology, you are interested in mycology, you're a mycologist. Please study fungi. Keystone Kingdom of all life outside of the ocean. Telluride Mushroom Festival is a great one. Peter McCoy wrote the Bible, the Radical Mycology book, the book called Radical Mycology. Is wonderful. There haven't found the great podcasts yet. I don't know. There's just not. Regenerative ecology is really new here. You know, you have the Cavira conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, United States every year, but that has just been completely co-opted by like big petroleum money. I heard people talking about like what kinds of herbicides are okay when, like last time I was there, it's just terrible. It's like big cattle ranching money, which is big petroleum money, you know, has completely co-opted the Cavira conference. So that's like of little value now. The value that you will get out of going to the Cavira conference are the connections you make with good-hearted, intelligent people. Soil beginner's soil handbook, John Stokes, John Stokes, S-T-O-K-E-S. I can't remember the name of the title of that book right now. It's a really good place to start. There are, you know, like, I'm really not impressed with a lot of the resources that are out there. There are a lot of the world authorities I'm not impressed with for a lot of reasons. There are very few people bringing all of the areas of regenerative ecology together into one coherent science, much less bringing like everything that mycology has to say about it in, you know, like I'm still working on Elaine Ingham to call herself a mycologist. You know, she very rarely intermingles the mycologists, people doing like soil remediation in mycology, soil regeneration in soil science, using the same species, working with the same species of fungi, doing a lot of the same work, completely different vocabulary. There's huge divides still. We need more people bridging those divides, but we need you bridging these divides. We need you on this. So thank you very much for your interest. If you want more resources, I did a poor job of listing resources right now. I didn't have a good plan coming into that. They're not coming to the top of my, they're not coming right now. So if you want more resources, please hit me up, wildcatgaia@gmail.com, +1 505 603 2129. I love you all very much. Thank you.